Hey, Mighty Rough Riders, Mr. Shallert here, and it's time to learn about short constructed response writing on the SBAC. Super important part of the test. So let's learn more in our lesson number 6. Fun fact, human beings score your short constructed response, though as I say that, I wonder if they're using AI. Watch out. If you haven't seen The Terminator, please watch it. So there are different types of SCR questions, short constructed response. Don't get confused by short, though. By short, they mean write enough to get the right answer, and you're actually going to have to write more than you think. The more you write, the better you'll do. Some of these questions will build on a previous reading. So like last week, we read about this dude, Roger Ermestead, who was at a school, blah, blah, blah. And you had to answer multiple choice questions about making inferences. Well, they could also ask you a short constructed response. What inference can be made about this dude Armistead, and support your answer with details from the text. So you'd have to get evidence and all that. So sometimes it'll be like that. The question we're using is a very different one. So I'd like you to go to Schoology and open the conclusion reading, because you are going to have to write a conclusion paragraph to an essay that somebody else started. Okay. Um, Here's a tip. There's almost always a rubric available, and it's good to be familiar with it. So when you write a conclusion paragraphs are really tough, I find, because I sort of repeat what I wrote before. But you're going to read somebody else's writing and then conclude, write your own paragraph. You can score a 0, a 1, or a 2. A 0 means there's really no conclusion. So don't worry about that. As long as you do a strong conclusion, you're going to get at least a 1, which says a limited conclusion. But the trouble is, like, if you just make a list or sort of restate or summarize the text, you're only going to get a 1. If you get a 2, though, which is what your goal is, that means you wrote an adequate conclusion, which means that you don't summarize or restate the argument. You do some other cool stuff, okay? And we'll talk about what that means. But that's how it's scored. BDA, you know by now, it's really important to read before. So let's look at the before. What do you notice? So up at the top here, and you should be looking at your own version, a student is writing an argumentative essay. So it's going to give you some context for what you're going to read. For the school newspaper, so it's like they wrote an article for a gap year. What's that even? And then at the bottom, it'll show this essay is missing a conclusion, write a conclusion that follows. So these 4 paragraphs here are what some made-up student wrote, and you have to write the conclusion, okay? So obviously, you have to read this one carefully. There's no skimming through this part. You're going to have to actually read this and understand it well enough to write your own conclusion, because I gotta sound like I know what I'm talking about. During, like I said, you know what to do. If you're not sure what a gap year is, they explain it here. They use some data here to support their argument. They even have a counter argument or a counter claim, which I know some of you have done. And from the rubric, it said, like, you have to support the claim or provide a call to action statement or provide an answer as to why the claim is important. So that's what you need to do here. But here are the big takeaways. Notice what kind of writing you're being asked to do. Is it argumentative? Is it a conclusion? They might ask you to write the introduction to an essay and then give you the rest of the essay. They might ask you to make an inference. There are a lot of things they could do. But no matter what type of question you get, the more you write, the better you'll score. So I'm talking like 8, 9, 10 sentences more. The more you write, the better you'll do. Promise. Sometimes you'll need to use evidence. Sometimes you'll need to finish or start a piece of writing. Either way, I urge you to use scratch paper or the digital notepad so you can plan your writing, okay? It's always better to plan it first. So I've got a special treat for you today, 2 quizzes. Part A is where you write a conclusion. Okay, you have to do the actual assignment. And then part B, I'm giving you some student conclusions and you're going to grade them so that you get more familiar with how you'll be graded. Thanks so much, everybody. Super important stuff, and we appreciate your effort.